I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Canon. We've been Disney fans our entire lives. And now, as childless adults, we're undertaking a journey through the media that shaped our lives.
Trying to find out if what made them special is still there.
We are
Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We're still on our superhero kick, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, but we're going a little bit backwards in our superhero now with one of the earlier ones. Not the earliest.
No.
You know,
early. And a definite hero that influenced many heroes that came after this one. And this is, with the exception of the one Mickey short we reviewed, this is the first full black and white film we've reviewed.
Yeah. I think eventually they did some colorization on some of the stuff from this series, but they didn't do it for what we watched.
No.
So
we are going all the way back. We are going to a point. We're going back to Walt's era. This is Walt's era. We are going to be taking a look at the character of Zorro. More specifically, the 1960 film, The Sign of Zorro. This film is very interesting. It's not, I wouldn't really call this a film, more like a compilation, because that's what this was.
Yeah, it's sort of like watching a clip show.
Yeah. Or I guess in our generation, it would be like if you bought a video of your favorite TV show and it's just a compilation of episodes edited to sort of be a movie. But you can tell
it's very interesting because watching this, you would have thought it was a really bad movie. Watching this. Not bad in the sense of not entertaining, but
it doesn't follow normal movie structure.
Yeah, it doesn't follow the typical 3-act film structure. The plot seems mostly related, but not, there are things that are mentioned earlier that never come back later, like you would expect in a film. But knowing that it's basically the first season of a TV show condensed into like an hour and a half film, you realize that, the scene you're watching now probably happened 4 episodes after the scene you just watched before.
So the character of Zorro is nothing new. It's the character of Zorro goes back to 1919, that pulp era. And it was started out as a series of short stories in magazines. They were compiled into books. And the character was very popular. It was only supposed to be like the one story that was written, but it was so popular that many stories were written about the character. And as you would expect, a popular character in literature, obviously they would try to take it to the screen. And they did. 1920 was the first Zorro film, The Mark of Zorro. And there's been Douglas Fairbanks played Zorro in that very first film and was the very first actor to ever play Zorro. And that starts so many Zorro movies throughout the years. And the character was very popular. Again, comic books, radio play, you name it, there was something Zorro related.
Including and this is interesting for those of you who don't really know the history of copyright and stuff like that. But at the time this was created, copyright laws were not what they were now. They only really applied to the actual printed work. But characters, the concept of a character was not a thing you could copyright. So whereas today, if we wanted to write something using Mickey Mouse, we can't just use that concept. We have to change it in some kind of significant way. But at the time, once you'd created a character, pretty much anybody could just write about that character. So the interesting thing is that the original author, Johnston McCulley, put out the kind of, I guess we would call it now, official Zorro stories, but immediately it was being written by tons of other people. And even some of the early movies were based not on McCulley's writings of Zorro, but on other authors' versions of Zorro. And the cool thing about it is that as things moved and changed, the original author would bring some of those things into it. The interesting thing being, I think one of the main changes comes from this show itself. If I remember correctly, this TV series was the first one to expand his name from Diego Vega, which it was in the original books, to Diego de la Vega.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is that it became kind of such a well-known trademark of the character that eventually the writer just went, no, yeah, his name is Diego de la Vega. Sure. That's exactly what it is.
it sounds more accurate to Spanish culture than just Diego Vega.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure that the original author was that knowledgeable of Spanish culture of the time.
Internet didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
So I mean, you had to assume at some point Walt Disney either saw one of these films or read one of the books to want to get the rights to do a TV show about this character.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of obvious from some of the things he did that he would have been a big Douglas Fairbanks fan. Mm-hmm. If you were alive in the 20s, you were a huge Douglas Fairbanks fan, no matter who you are. He was like the biggest star in the world. So I'm sure that the original few movies starring him were probably a big influence on Walt. In many ways, they were a huge influence. Pretty much everything Douglas Fairbanks did was a huge influence on what we consider now the kind of swashbuckling kind of style. So most of your pirate movies and stuff, I mean, whenever we finally get into Pirates of the Caribbean, we're going to be talking about Fairbanks again. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of that kind of stuff really influenced the culture at large. So I'm almost positive that I don't know how huge a reader, Walt was necessarily, but if he didn't read the book, he definitely knew the movies because the movies were huge.
Mm-hmm. And, we get the series in 57 and that ran, a good run. It had from 57 to 59 and they ran 70 something episodes.
I think it was what we would consider now about 3 seasons.
Yeah, for a show in the 50s, that even by today's standards, that's not a bad run. And really, the show only ended. The show was still popular when it ended, and only ended due to a dispute between Disney and the network at the time. Which, I could see the network wanting a bigger share of the profits of the show, and Disney telling the network to go, no, my money, mine.
Yeah, that's a big thread in the history of the Disney Corporation.
Disney didn't own their own network yet. Wouldn't be a couple of decades until they did. So, I mean, and even after the 57 show, the reruns of the show were still popular. The show, when, syndication became a thing in the 70s and 80s, they colorized the old show, and that brought more people to rediscover the show in reruns. That's kind of how you and I kind of discovered the show.
Oh, yeah. This was definitely on during my childhood, and when Disney Channel started, this was a huge staple of Disney Channel, kind of in the afternoon, early afternoon or whatever.
They would show the colorized versions during the day, and like late at night, when when there was only adults watching, they would actually rerun the same episode in black and white. So
Yeah.
you kind of got both. Like for the young ones who only know color television, okay, here's a colorized version of Zorro. For the old folks who grew up with the original show, okay, here's the original black and white version that you remember.
Yeah.
More movies came up because of those reruns. There was a reboot series that the Family Channel did in 1990. Duncan Regger played Zorro in that series. But the one, when you say Zorro, most people our age is going to know the 1998 Antonio Banderas movie.
Yeah, that was the real reboot for our generation.
Yeah. And really made Antonio Banderas a star.
Yeah. Just as this series was the reboot for our parents' generation.
Yeah.
Because the character had been out for like, 30 some years by the point of the TV show.
Yeah.
And those Douglas Fairbanks movies were made like immediately after the book was written. So that would have been their parents' version of Zorro. And then, the television version we're talking about today would have been our parents' version of Zorro. And then the Antonio Banderas one would have been kind of our generation's modern version of Zorro.
And there's been talks of a new Zorro over at CBS. It was about last year, they had talked about doing a new Zorro series with a female lead. And that kind of was part of the big thing that came around last year of a lot of reboots coming along with a female lead. You pretty much name any old show that they wanted to reboot, and they wanted to do it with a female lead because they figured, let's try to get more women viewers onto our action shows. Women still watch action shows, but I understand the need to have a female hero. I get that.
Yeah. And I mean, at least, props to the Antonio Banderas movie. At least they tried to get a Hispanic actor to play a Hispanic character.
Yeah, he was the only Hispanic actor that played a lead in that movie. It would be many years later till I found out Catherine Zeta-Jones wasn't Hispanic.
Yeah, nope, Welsh. For those of you who don't know, Welsh. Yeah, the interesting thing about this character is that I love his place in the history of developing the idea of the masked hero.
The masked vigilante.
Yeah, the masked vigilante hero, the hero of the people.
Yes.
Zorro himself really drew a lot from what is kind of considered the first masked superhero, the origin of the superhero genre in that sense, which would have been the Scarlet Pimpernel. The Scarlet Pimpernel was published in like early 1900s, I think like 1903, 1905, something like that.
And of course, the Scarlet Pimpernel will be parodied by Daffy Duck in the Scarlet Pumpernickel.
Exactly. There is a lot of that in there. But that was really the first idea of there's a rich guy who's very good at fighting, who pretends to be kind of, this dandyish, foppish kind of guy who doesn't like violence and won't be in a fight, and he just likes reading and clothes, but really he's like the world's greatest fighter and, puts on a mask and goes out and does stuff.
Yeah, Scarlet Pimpernel begat Zorro, Zorro begat Batman, and Batman begat every other hero there was.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is a pretty interesting lineage, but at least those first big three. You could also kind of throw the Phantom in there, because the Phantom...
or the Shadow.
Yeah, the Phantom and the Shadow are both kind of in that same vein. I'm not entirely sure. You know, you can say parts of Superman come from that, the idea of the alter ego that is meek, but I think that's kind of where
The similarities
the
end.
similarity ends there. Yeah, but I would definitely say that Zorro definitely, because Zorro came out within a few years of the Scarlet Pimpernel. So, you know, that is definitely a direct connection. And then, you know, Batman would come out a little later. The Shadow and the Phantom preceded Batman a little bit, so they kind of built on that legacy. But yeah, by the time you get to Batman, you've kind of really locked in that idea of this is what the masked dark vigilante is.
Yeah. So we, you know, and the very popular, we talk about the, you know, the Zorro series itself is pretty popular, but this movie, the one we're talking about, really owes its existence to another Disney hero? Question mark. That would be David Crockett. So for those of you who don't know or don't know the history, Walt Disney himself had a TV show called Disneyland, and the entire point of the show Disneyland was to use advertising revenue to build Disneyland. That was the entire point of the show. And
yeah, it was like an old GoFundMe.
It was the original GoFundMe.
Yeah.
So, but after Disneyland got built, what are you going to do with the show now? You have the show, people are watching it. You can't just keep talking about your theme park. You got to do something else. So he started airing, you know, edited down versions of the movies, collections of shorts, and new material just made for television. One of the most popular was a miniseries of 1-hour specials based on the folk character Davy Crockett. And the thing about this, right after these specials aired, they would air on television in black and white. This is the 1955. 1955, Marty! Which is exactly why Davy Crockett theme song is playing in Back to the Future when he's in the 50s.
Yep.
That's how popular Davy Crockett was. So it airs on TV in black and white. Disney decides, well, they're popular. We're not going to air this again because his show, it was a 1-hour show. 1-hour shows don't usually get reruns back then. So he would take a few of those 1-hour specials, compile them into a movie length, and show them in theaters in color, because these were filmed in color. Now people want to see him again, because again, there's no way to see him on TV, and now you're watching him in color. Again, color was like the thing. Color televisions didn't exist back then. So this was a big deal. And, you know, people would rush to see them, and it was very popular. Disney decided, well, if this compilation works, maybe another compilation could work. Zorro was still very popular at the time, even though the show had been off the air for a few years. So he took one storyline, the first storyline of the series, which was about 13 episodes, which we would consider a season. And he took about 8 of those episodes, compiled them into something resembling a movie length, and released them to theaters. As we said before, hour-long series don't get repeats. Half-hour series do. Zorro was a half-hour series. So people had already been watching these for a while. So, and this show was filmed in black and white. So in 1960, you're releasing a black and white movie of a compilation of a show that's already about 5 years old at this point. It didn't really get the attention that Walt was hoping for. The best I can explain it is Stranger Things. Everyone knows what Stranger Things is. I don't necessarily watch the show. I've never seen the show, but I know of it. And those are about 8 episode long seasons, right? Give or take.
Yeah, eight or 10, I think. Yeah.
So yeah. So imagine Stranger Things the movie is coming out. It's going to get a full theatrical run. Every Stranger Things fan is going to go crazy. And then when you go see it, it's stuff you already saw 4 years ago.
Yeah, edited kind of slapdash together so that you just get like the most essential bits.
Yeah, the most essential story bits in a hour and a half to 2 hour movie. Are you really going to go see that? Are you really going to be excited about that? Now, in a different way. Yeah, go ahead.
And it also goes along with the Stranger Things comparison is that, like, you can go watch Stranger Things at any time if you've got a Netflix. You know, I mean, if you've got access to Netflix, you can watch it whenever you want. And even though it wasn't, you know, our idea of streaming, they reran Zorro a lot. Yeah, I mean, Zorro was kind of an early biggie in the you know, the idea of reruns and syndication. So you could catch Zorro all the time on TV at the time. You'd probably, if you were a Zorro fan, you'd probably seen these episodes many times. And now they're asking, you know, you to pay to go see it in a theater in a less interesting form. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least with Davy Crockett, the best comparison I could say is Doctor Who. You'll either get the season premiere or the season finale maybe days after it aired on television, and now you're getting it in the theater. That at least makes sense because you're getting 2 episodes with 2 hours.
And there was no other way to watch it. They did not re-air Davy Crockett. So if you wanted to see it again, you had to go to the theater. If you missed it the first time, you had to go to the theater. That was not true with Zorro.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be until the 70s or 80s where Davy Crockett was actually re-aired on television in its original format.
Yeah.
And even then, most of the time, they were just playing the movie version.
That is true. I mean, I guess the closest comparison to Doctor Who would be like if they discovered one of the missing episodes and only released it in theaters. You know, it's like, and well, we've got to go to theater now.
And they've done that a few years ago with some of the missing, with the animated
where they rebuilt it to the audio. Yeah.
So something like that.
Also, an interesting comparison with Doctor Who, at least in the early years. This is not true for those of you who are watching the new series that's, you know, airing now. But back when Doctor Who originally aired in the 60s, they would do these kind of serialized story arcs. So their story would go over, you know, maybe 6 episodes or so. And it would be a contained storyline. Mm-hmm. So you would have, like, these 6 episodes are going to be a story about the Doctor fighting the Daleks, and the next 6 episodes are going to be a story about the Doctor in, you know, revolutionary France or whatever. Okay. And in between them, you would get kind of like, you know, to be continued. And Zorro as a series was kind of like that. There were these self-contained story arcs. So this was not necessarily like the first full, what we would consider a season, but those kind of like 13 episodes or whatever were the first story arc. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of a serialized format for those 13 episodes. They wrapped up that part of the story, and then episode 14 started with kind of a new chapter in the life of Zorro. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even so much what we would consider a season now as just like, this is one story arc. But the problem is it took 13 half-hour episodes to tell this on television. They are doing it in an hour and a half here. And the movie feels like that. Yeah. Yeah. I think they specifically did eight of the 13 episodes.
Yeah. According to Disney.fandom.com.
Yeah. A wonderful website, and we love all the contributors to it. If you are a contributor to that website, we love you. You have made our podcast what it is today.
Yeah. So do you want to get into the movie?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the kind of what it feels like to watch this as a film.
So let's talk about some of these again. Don't, you know, peeling the curtain back. I don't kind of reveal this stuff, but I am of the Latino persuasion, and these are a movie with a bunch of Latinos being played by white guys.
Yeah, I mean,
It was the 50s. I get it.
Some of them are Latinos. I think most of them are meant to be Hispanics. A lot of people. Here's the interesting thing: is I've noticed that a lot of people, because of it being set in the kind of Southern California region, I think a lot of people get the idea that Zorro is supposed to be a Mexican hero, and he was never a Mexican hero. He's a Spanish colonial.
He's a Spaniard.
Yeah, he's a Spaniard in California during the time of Spanish California, not Mexican California, Spanish California. So this is during the Spanish colonial period, and all of these, upper nobility and the comandante that runs the town and stuff, these are all supposed to be Spanish-born people in California.
Mm-hmm.
So that, just in case that's where your brain was going, if you don't know that much about Zorro and you just kind of think like, oh, he's the guy that speaks Spanish, and for a lot of Americans that's gonna immediately go to like Mexican. No, these are Spanish colonials.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's talk about some of the actors. The main actor, Guy Williams, as Don Diego de la Vega, and Zorro.
Yes.
Guy Williams was a model that tried to break into acting, and it never really worked out for him until, Disney got him and, hey, let's play this character, and it worked for him, and it was his most well-known character.
Until, I don't know if you could call that his most well-known character, because he's got another biggie in there.
Go ahead.
He is the father on the Lost in Space series. The original one. Yeah. He's Papa Robinson there. So, that's a biggie. I watched both Lost in Space and Zorro in reruns as a kid, and they were, big kind of influences on me as a kid. I did not realize until I was an adult that was the same guy, because he looks very, very different, That pencil mustache that he's got for Zorro apparently changes his entire look there, but yeah. He never really achieved that level of fame again. He also did some work on Bonanza.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a Western fan, then you saw him. He was Will Cartwright on Bonanza. And he wasn't like, a main character, but he was part of the Cartwright clan, so he was, more than just a quick, character actor in the background. Yeah, so Zorro, Lost in Space, and then that kind of Bonanza thing were kind of his three big things. He eventually retired to Argentina, which is kind of interesting. And one of the reasons why he retired in Argentina, and this was honestly like in the late 70s. He ended up dying in 1989. But in the late 70s, he moved to Argentina because he had visited Argentina at one point, and they loved Zorro in Argentina. And they treated him so well. And in the late 70s, he decided to retire from acting. He still did a few personal appearances, and when he retired, he thought, they really love me in Argentina. I guess I'll go down there. And it seems he was happy in Argentina, so good for him.
There are worse places to retire and worse reasons to retire there.
Yeah, and for those of you who are wondering about the ethnicity, Guy Williams was born Armando Joseph Catalano. He is Sicilian uh, by birth. His parents were Sicilian, I believe. So, yeah.
Guy
Um,
Williams actually almost came back to acting in the 80s. There was going to be, because of the popularity of the Zorro reruns, they were going to do a reboot with Guy Williams being the father of a new Zorro. He turned it down because they were going to make it a comedy.
mm,
Yeah, so Guy Williams, he was offered the role by Disney, and he saw the script and says, no, this is a comedy. I'm not going to play Zorro in a comedic way, and just never took there. If you, it's on YouTube. It's called Zorro and Son. It is bad. Canceled after 5 episodes with good reason.
yeah, and the thing is there was always humor in the character of Zorro. But it's the type of wit that we're used to with a lot of superheroes. You know, it's Spider-Man bantering with his villains. You know, it's that kind of humor. It's making fun of the bumbling soldiers that he's defeating.
And even Diego playing the fool is part of the comedy.
Yeah, but it's not like a slapstick joke a minute kind of thing. It's more situational humor, and sometimes you get a little slapstick with soldiers falling over themselves trying to chase after Zorro. But it's not intended to be like, you know, a really comedic thing. It's an action series.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. My father actually met Guy Williams when he was younger. On one of his, you know, he did some kind of promotional tour visiting areas, and he visited the area that my dad was at the time, and my dad got to go see him. My father, I've mentioned before, a huge fan of like westerns, and watched Zorro as a kid, watched Lost in Space as a kid, so you know, he would have been a big Guy Williams fan.
And that's kind of one of the reasons we're doing the episode now, because let's throw a bone to some of our older listeners, stuff that they grew up with.
Yeah, we started this series, stuff that had shaped us, but, Disney's not just for our generation, of course. Disney's been around long enough that they've got, 4 or 5 generations of people now that grew up with Disney. So, we did want to be interested in that. And also, I mean, like I said, we grew up with this series. It wasn't being made when we were kids, but it was absolutely kind of a formative part of my childhood watching Zorro.
Yeah, there are definitely people our age that grew up with reruns of I Love Lucy and Gilligan's Island.
I am also that person.
Yes.
Nick at Night raised me until about age 13, so
I knew more about classic SNL than modern SNL at the time.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, honestly, you can hear it. You can hear it in the sort of things I reference in the show. I mean, half of my references are 30 years before I was even born.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, Guy Williams, great actor. Especially he played the character of Diego. It's one of the rare instances where a superhero can play the alter ego and the hero different ways and make it believable.
Yeah, and that's always the trick when you're playing a character with a secret identity that most actors cannot get. You'll find somebody who they're a really good Spider-Man, but they're not a very good Peter Parker. Or they absolutely nail Bruce Wayne, but once they put on the Batman suit, they're not believable anymore.
Yeah.
So to find an actor that can do both with equal ease, and you absolutely buy him both as Diego just trying to, put on this. You always understand that he's more cunning behind his eyes than he's acting.
Mm-hmm.
But you understand why the people of the town would absolutely believe that Diego de la Vega is a nobody and nothing. He's too soft to ever be Zorro.
Yeah.
So let's move on.
Let's
to
move
who
on
else we got here.
to let's talk about Zorro's sidekick, sort of his deaf servant Bernardo, played by mime actor Gene Sheldon.
Yeah. In this version, it kind of changes depending on the version of Zorro you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But in this version of Zorro, he is just a mute.
Yeah.
He cannot speak for some reason. I don't. They don't actually say the reason in the stuff we get in the film, and I can't remember if they ever gave a reason in the series. But he decides in the series to also pretend to be deaf to everybody except Diego, so that he can secretly listen in to the planning of other people and listen to what they're saying behind Diego's back.
Yeah, pretty much being Diego's eyes and ears in the city. Yeah,
and because of the way people viewed the disabled at the time and partially still today, everybody ignores him. You know, he's the deaf mute guy. He probably doesn't have a brain in his head either, you know. And also Bernardo does play the fool. You know, they specifically say he's going to play the fool. So he does play up that he might not completely understand, and maybe his brain is not the sharpest, and, you know. But yeah, Gene Sheldon had a kind of interesting career. Like I said, he was a mime. And he did a lot of kind of you know, 30s and 40s films, you know, in the background, a lot of comedy, backing up people like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Harry Langdon. I mean, these are big things. But he had a pretty interesting career in Disney as well.
Yeah, no stranger to Disney.
Yeah, most of his work probably was via Disney at the time.
I know him. I watch Babes in Toyland every year, and every year I see him.
Yep. And he also did a lot of kind of guest appearances on the Disney shows that were being made during the 50s and 60s, you know, during Walt's era. All the anthology series and the kind of variety series that they were doing. He was in an episode called Golden Horseshoe Review that they used quite a lot as like a, you know, he's a banjo player and he keeps having these accidents while trying to play the banjo, and, you know, so he was, you know, his career was very much tied up with Disney even before he got the role on Zorro. So, you know, he was pretty much the Disney veteran, I think, on the series at the time.
Yep. Yeah, and let's move on. Alejandro de la Vega, which is Diego's father, played by George J. Lewis.
Yeah, and actually a Mexican-born actor here. One of the few Spanish-speaking actors that was in the series, and you can tell it. There's a lot of Spanish in this series.
Yeah.
That they mostly speak English, but then they'll throw in a Spanish word or phrase for flavor.
We call that Spanglish.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm not sure I would immediately do it Spanglish, because it's always like, and remember, we're not just white people playing Spaniards, or like, you know, or whatever. But the interesting thing is that when he does the Spanish portions, you can actually tell this is a guy who knows Spanish. His accent is much better than most of the other people who have to say it. But he did the thing you would normally find a Mexican actor in the early days of Hollywood doing. He played a lot of Native Americans in Westerns, and he played a lot of, Mexican servants and stuff. But he did, he strangely played an Arab in Casablanca. He was in Casablanca. But he got more work, strangely, when Sound Pictures came in because of the fact that he spoke Spanish. So he could do English without really an accent. He really does not have a Mexican accent when he's speaking English. But also he was fluent in Spanish. So he got a lot of work when they needed somebody to do Spanish dialogue or films for a Spanish-speaking audience, or whatever. So the invention of sound films gave him a lot of work. He also showed up in other big series at the same time, not just Zorro, but he was in Lone Ranger. He was in Adventures of Superman for a little bit, bit parts here and there. But I think Alejandro de la Vega was probably his biggest role ever, and he repeated the character in a couple of other things. Not repeated, excuse me. He had been in a few other sort of Zorro things before he finally landed the role of Don Alejandro. I had that backwards. Please forgive me. So yeah, this was not the first time he'd run into the character of Zorro as an actor, but it was kind of his biggest role in any of these.
All right, so let's move on. Henry Calvin as Sergeant Garcia, which kind of wraps up our main cast of was in every episode.
Yeah.
Henry Calvin, another Disney, well-known Disney guy. Again, he's in Babes in Toyland. I see it every year.
Yeah. And I mean, he was another one that had kind of an interesting, varied role.
Even the character has had its own. Sometimes is a bumbling fool, like he's in this series. Sometimes he's just a straight up villain, like in the Fairbanks movies.
Yeah. In this series, he absolutely is the comic relief, bumbling kind of guy. But it's an interesting thing. He also was a singer. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Babes in Toyland was a musical.
Yeah, but even outside that, he did duets with Annette Funicello. Another big Disney name there. And Ray Bolger, who you will know as the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz.
Another Babes in Toyland actor.
Yep, another Babes in Toyland actor.
As was Annette.
Yeah, as was Annette. But interestingly, I remember him from an episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show as well. There is an episode where they have to have a couple of people come on and do Oliver Hardy and Stan Laurel, and he was Oliver Hardy. Which,
again, plays into his role in Babes in Toyland.
Yeah, I mean it's really kind of interesting when you look into. I love looking into kind of the smaller name actors that we run into in these things because they by far have the more interesting careers to me. So yeah,
Character actors.
yeah, I
You need
love
them.
me some character actors, man. They're always my favorite actors.
Yeah, so that's it for our main characters throughout the entire series. Let's talk about the main villains, at least of this film, of the 13 episodes that compiled this movie. Britt Lemon as Captain Monasterio, the Comandante of the army, the governing body of Spanish Los Angeles at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a city mayor with more power.
Yeah.
Is really kind of what he did. Um, he this is kind of the high point of his career, honestly. He spent the 60s doing kind of, guest appearances on, Perry Mason and Virginian and stuff, but by the 80s he had become just a crew guy, unit production manager, first assistant director, worked on a lot of shows in the 80s that you would have heard of, but just, in the crew.
Mhm.
So
Moving on, then Fan Wen as Pena, the Monasterio's lawyer and partner in crime. They're both equally as corrupt. Corrupt lawyer. Never thought I'd see that, right? That's a
yeah.
novel idea.
This guy had a bit more of a lasting career. Interestingly, this was one of Lee Strasberg's students. If you're into acting, he's one of the major acting teachers at the time, and this guy studied under him, not just like at his school, but like directly under him. So he was a pretty highly trained actor. Um, Apart from this, he was known for being in an episode of The Twilight Zone's first season called Execution, which is the one where, there's a guy who is transported right into the gallows in the Old West. Interesting episode. If you've never seen it, I won't spoil anything beyond that. Go watch it. He went, he's another one of those kind of character actors in the background. But in the 80s, he had a little bit of a film breakthrough. He was Mr. Ambrose in the film Splash, which we have talked about before on the show.
Yeah, and considering Splash has kind of gotten back into the news lately.
Yep. So once again, kind of another fun little character actor. Hey, that guy kind of dude. But this does seem to be one of the more long-running parts he had, because he's in most of the first season of this show.
Yeah. Again, he's one of the main villains of this first story arc. So let's get into this story arc. This film version starts us in 1820 Spanish California, as Diego has been summoned back from university in Spain, as he's been told that again, Monasterio and Pena has kind of taken over the town and they've kind of corrupted it. The first thing we see here is, Guy Williams showing off them fencing skills to and he's actually not bad.
Yeah. Guy Williams had been in a lot of kind of swashbuckling movies before this, in kind of small parts. So this was not his first rodeo, as you would say, when it came to sword fighting. So he already kind of had that with going for him when he got cast. But yeah, they quickly establish everything in this movie is done quickly, by the way, because they've just edited like the most essential details into it. Yeah. But they quickly established that at university, Diego was the fencing champion for like his entire time there. He has a box full of medals. He's got a couple of big trophy cups, you know.
His entire quarters is filled with awards and medals of his skills, and he pretty much makes the decision right then and there is that knowing that there's corruption in Los Angeles, in his town, that he's going to change himself. He's going to put on this persona of this foppish character, as you said, and to do that, he needs to get rid of anything that would even make people think that he's competent in anything. Pretty much telling Bernardo to throw all of his medals and things out over the ocean, as you said, on the ship.
Yeah.
And he creates this character, you know. It's Bernardo that kind of inspires him to become a scholar character versus anything else. You know, he opens the book, he shows, you know, and Diego saying, "Hey, that's it. I'm going to be a scholar. My character will be a man of peace versus a man of action." Yeah. Just to throw everyone off. The sign language that Bernardo uses clearly isn't ASL.
Yeah. No, well, also he is Spanish. He would not have been using ASL. I do not actually know the status of any centralized sign language in Spain at the time. I do not think there was any. Up until the kind of creation of ASL in America, at least, and I think it was this way in a lot of European countries as well. From my years training to be a sign language interpreter, which I did for a little while. I was never an interpreter, but I was in the training before moving to a different thing. So I do have a little bit of a history in this, and I can still get by in ASL. But for the most part, individual deaf people would kind of come up with their own gesture and sign language to communicate with the people in their lives. If they were quote unquote fortunate enough to go to a school or some other collection where they were around other deaf people, those individual communities would kind of make their own languages to use among themselves. But it was very difficult for a deaf person to just go to another place and be able to communicate even with other deaf people, because there was no kind of centralized codified language. So Bernardo probably, this is some sort of sign language he came up with specifically with Diego.
Mm-hmm. Well, Diego clearly understands it.
Diego clearly understands it, and honestly, Diego is probably the only one who would.
Yeah.
There are some gestures that you can kind of, figure out. A lot of what Gene Sheldon uses is kind of typical mime things. You can figure out some things like the walk or somebody died or, whatever. They're kind of normalized gestures that he uses that an audience would understand. But most of what we understand from Bernardo comes from Diego immediately going, "Yes, I see what you're saying. He went there and then he did this and then he did the other thing." And then Bernardo would just nod. So for the audience, Diego kind of translates everything.
One thing I do kind of like in a sort of they would do that is every time Bernardo signs Zorro, he does the Z, and even him signing the Z, it does the sword slash.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if that's them putting the sound effect in there, or that's just Gene going.
Yeah, I don't know. It is kind of interesting because he can, the character can hear, so maybe that's just his funny little thing he does.
Yeah, so and then he creates the character for himself of being deaf, and he commits to being deaf. It's like there's a scene where the Comandante shoots a gun and he doesn't even flinch.
Yeah, which bravo to him, because I don't know how he knew that was coming. I don't think he did. He just, I'm not sure I could do that. So, Bernardo is an amazing actor. Bravo to him.
So yeah, and that likely this 4 or 5 minute scene probably was half an episode when it originally aired, and they cut it down completely.
Yeah.
So so let's, and by the time we get to California, all the main players are shown, and we get to that first story arc of one of Diego's father's friends is arrested for treason, and all he did was speak up against the corruption. He's getting arrested, and that's the first couple of episodes, I guess.
Yeah.
In this thing.
But you know what? This is my favorite character simply because his name is Don Nacho.
Don Nacho.
Yeah, Don Ignacio Torres, but Don Nacho.
Yeah, Nacho
is what they call him.
Yeah, it's a general nickname in Spanish culture, you know.
Yeah, but you know, I love me some nachos, so so I'm gonna smile. It makes me happy. Actually, this character is a really interesting character because he's not particularly revolutionary in the sense of like, you know, grab your sword and go fight a guy. Like you said, he just spoke out. He saw something bad happening and he went, no, that's bad. And now not only him, but his family is being persecuted for it. And I'm glad they kind of started with this story because in times of great corruption and revolution, this is most people who are persecuted. Yeah, they're not really the ones that grab their weapons and try to mount a revolution. They're just the people who go like, no, I'm going to say when a bad thing is done. You have done a bad thing.
You're lying, and I'm going to tell the truth, and that's the person that always gets the first in line of the firing squad.
Yeah, or headed to the noose as they are trying to do with Don Nacho at the beginning of this.
Yeah, and that's the main thing is, and he is, you know, and the first episode arc part of the movie, whatever it is, because this is essentially an 16-act movie.
Yeah, there are a couple of major storylines that appear and then are resolved, and then it moves on to the next storyline. This is not a traditional movie. There is not one overwhelming plot except the Commandante is bad.
Yeah.
That's the main plot.
This is 8 episodes condensed down to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot. So again, we fast forward because they seem to do that as well. There's a lot of quick cuts that you can kind of tell that these scenes were not directly at one after the other.
Yeah, if you're used to watching television from this time, you're used to there being kind of like fade out on one scene, fade in on the other with some transitional music and what. None of that here. It is just hard. Yeah, I mean, but for the most part, it is just kind of jarring hard cuts between scenes because it's kind of the only way they could really transition. There's not a lot of transition. There's just, you know, we're outside by the stagecoach now. We're inside in the Commandante's office. Now we're back in, you know, the hacienda. Now we're back in the, you know, it's kind of, like I said, as a movie, you would not forgive this. If this was shown to you as we're going to sit down and watch a movie, you would be very, very angry at the way that this is edited. But knowing how it was created, I can kind of give them a bit of leeway here.
I would definitely use this movie as an introduction to the series.
Yeah, it is a great introduction if you don't know who Zorro is as a character, because this gives you this is a really good origin story. Mm-hmm. It really does give you the origin of Zorro, why and how he came up with the character, how he maintains it, and all. But it's fast. It is the short version. This is Cliff Notes Zorro.
And there are definite times, and I do like it that Diego wants to break character, but he knows he can't without revealing himself. Yeah, especially when he's dealing. Yeah, he sees the corruption in the streets right early on in this film version, and Bernardo's kind of holding it back, like, no, stay in character, stay in character. Scenes with his father, when his father is pretty much calling him a coward, and he's trying to, he really wants to tell his father what his plan is, but he doesn't want his father to be involved in it, so he has to continue with this character.
Yeah, there is one point where his father, who is a revolutionary, I mean, let's just point it out. Don Nacho, not so much a revolutionary. Alejandro de la Vega wants to grab a sword and wants to get into it. That is, he is very much a man of action. And there is a scene kind of, at one point where, Don Alejandro's like, let's go, grab the horses, grab your weapons. We're going to go storm the castle.
Yeah. There's a whole, him and the other Dons, all the landowners are just saying, hey, let's storm them. And, Diego, in a way, Diego's trying to be, we get a plan together first. You cannot just run in there. There's more of them than there are of you.
Let's contact the governor. Let's try to do the chain of command. Let's talk to the law. Maybe we can write a sternly worded letter to the king. I mean, he's going the kind of thing. And Alejandro turns around and says, for a moment there, I almost knew what it was to be proud of a son. Yeah, and it's such a heartbreaking moment, because that in 20 minutes, Diego's going to be putting on the Zorro costume and saving everybody's butts. But in the eyes of his father, he's a loser. He's like this weak little nothing that's not even willing to stand up for his homeland. And it just, it broke my heart to hear that. Though it's such a horrible scene of just Diego standing there and like taking it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And that's part of the thing. He, you could tell he wants to tell his father, no, I can break him out of jail. You just got to listen to me. But he doesn't want to get his father involved because his father's going to get killed.
Yeah, he's very worried that, this kind of frontal assault idea of his father's is going to get not only him, but the other Dons killed.
And it's kind of, it's a throwaway line in this movie version, but it's sort of the real war is between the landowners, the Dons, and the Comandante.
Yeah.
Despite
the fact that Zorro is considered a hero of the people, and the show is specifically, but also in this kind of edited down movie, they tell you repeatedly Zorro is a hero of the people. The people love Zorro.
Yeah.
We actually don't get a lot from the people. We get a lot from the landowners. We get a lot from the bosses, but we don't get a lot from the people.
I guess this is, again, that has to do with they only are telling you the most essential parts of this first story arc. You're not getting the one-off episodes where he saves a poor person or whatever. You don't get that.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that in the series. I don't mean to say like this series is awful about that, but if you're just watching this film and you don't have a larger sense of the series, it is very jarring to kind of hear like, no, the people love him. And you're like, where? Who are these people that love him? Because we only see, because of the way the movie is edited together, we only see like the richest people in town. So it's interesting if you're taking it in the context of this is just a film. It's why I say that you have to give it a lot of leeway and not judge it on the sense of how you would judge a film in general.
Yeah. What else can we talk?
I was gonna say, going back to Don Nacho, that whole kind of first, let's call it an act, really deals with, Zorro's first mission is they're going to hang Don Nacho without a trial.
Yeah.
They're just going to summarily execute him. And Zorro has to break in the middle of the day for night, To, this is also a film and TV series with a lot of day for night shots. It's like
black and white. It can work. And this is also a set.
Noon that they're filming this, but you know that they, like, in the editing room, they were like, just put a bunch of cricket noises in there. Nobody will know the difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of jarring. But, you know, Zorro's first mission that we ever see from this version of Zorro is to go break Don Nacho out of jail. And it's good. It shows his cunning because, you know, it's Zorro. It's the fox. Yeah. And that name was chosen not because the fox is any kind of, you know, a visual symbol of his like it is Batman. You know, Batman is like everything's branded with bats. You never really see a fox, but it's supposed to be the cunning of the fox. He's sly like a fox. He's quick and stealthy.
They use the analogy of foxes and sheep, but it's more like the wolf in the hen house.
Yeah.
If you want to use an American analogy.
Yeah. But, you know, while Zorro is probably primarily known, if you know the character at all, as being a good swordsman, and that is a huge part of his character, he was a very intellectual hero. He plans. He is one step ahead. You know, he uses his brain, and then if he can't do anything else, he'll use his sword.
Yeah, and even it comes up in this film, and probably many times in this series, where people come close to discovering that Diego is Zorro. That's when you have Fernando take up the mask and kind of ride around to show people that Diego is not Zorro.
Yeah. Interestingly, there is an episode of the 1960s Batman that does this exact same storyline in a really kind of cool way, with Alfred standing on a rooftop waving as Batman, so that Bruce Wayne can be cleared. So it's interesting to see, you know, kind of the early versions of what they'll kind of refine, I suppose, later. But yeah. So the interesting thing is that Zorro is also one of those heroes that he doesn't really want to use violence. No. Violence is very definitely the last resort. And even when he fights somebody, he just wants to fight them just enough to disable them so that he can run away. Yep. Or that, you know, the person he's saving can run away. He doesn't want to wound them even. He definitely does not want to kill them. But he does a lot of little things. He uses the same trick several times over the course of this film, where he'll put a sword to somebody's back and be like, I'll be right here behind you holding this sword to your back, and then he'll switch out the sword for something else that'll just like prop against something, and the person will just be standing alone in a room with a sword to their back, or a fireplace poker or whatever he's grabbed.
The nearest sharp object.
Yeah, the nearest kind of sharp object that he can wedge there to make them think there's a swordsman behind them. Yeah. And he uses that trick at least twice in this film, but he uses it several times over the course of the series, I remember. So, you know, he wants to be, you know, he uses his brain. There's a thing in there where the kind of second act, I guess we could call it, then becomes that Alejandro, you know, Don Nacho is saved and runs off to tell the governor that the Comandante is very evil and please come remove him.
But now he's rendered a fugitive.
Yeah. And then Don Nacho comes back and says, you know, the governor's going to come. We just have to delay him. And they come up with this idea of basically, let's storm the castle. You know, we're just going to, you know, go take him prisoner and wait for the governor to arrive.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about of Alejandro wanting to storm in, Diego saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
you do that, you're gonna get killed."
Yeah, and even though Zorro shows up and tries to, he nobody gets killed, but his father is shot and wounded.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing is that Zorro is going to get Bernardo. Diego goes back. Bernardo, I need you to get bandages and things to remove a bullet and everything. He's hidden his father in a cave. And he's going to go back and do surgery. And all Zorro says is, "Stay here. I will send your son with help." So all Alejandro has to do is just stay put. But does Alejandro do that?
No,
No.
I have no idea how that would relate to the modern day.
Yeah, I don't know either. So
Stay put, and you'll be fine.
yeah, just stay in your cave and wait for Diego to arrive, Don Alejandro. Yeah, but he kind of hears, rustling out in the distance, and he's like, "Oh, it's the Commandante. I will, go out and face him with this giant gaping bullet wound in my chest."
Yeah.
And so he walks out with his sword and immediately passes out where the Commandante finds him.
We did kind of skip part of it. Zorro kind of has a bat cave.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It is. You don't really see it a lot in this movie, but he does have a bat cave. Yeah.
A little room in the back of his house that apparently existed before they owned it or something. Even though he's a landowner, it's a '60s TV show, guys. Just run with it.
There was a weird room in the back of the hacienda. We don't know how it got there. Yeah, he does have it. You don't really see a lot of it in this. I think there's like one scene that's in it.
Well, one when it's introduced, and two when he goes to get Bernardo.
Yeah. But yeah, so there is a version of the Batcave. He does have his own like secret lair. Very important in the superhero trope building.
Yeah, basically they say it's a way for him to get out of the house without being seen.
Yeah.
Especially by his father, so he doesn't want his father to know that he's Zorro.
Yeah. Speaking of his father, who is lying near dead in a field somewhere.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this is when Diego dressed as Zorro still. I'm really glad he still had the costume on and didn't decide to come as Diego, which is what I thought he was going to do, but then he shows back up as Zorro, and I was like, okay, that's weird. But Zorro shows up and is able to save his father again, but his father is still arrested. He's not killed, but he is arrested. And
Alejandro and Nacho.
Yeah,
Nacho.
and Don Nacho again. But Don Nacho turns himself back in willingly because when he escapes, thanks to Zorro's help, the Commandante arrests his wife and daughter.
Yeah, and that also seems even pretty much everyone is kind of against this because they're innocent in all this. Yeah,
even the shady lawyer. The shady lawyer is like, the public is not with you on this one. You are losing the people.
But as typical, I guess you could say politician, he kind of spins the story. So, we're only holding them until Don Nacho returns, and then we will set them free. We want to make sure that justice is served. We're not going to harm them, but we want Nacho to know that his family will be all right if he turns himself in. Doesn't make it any better, but yeah. Yeah,
I mean, holding family members hostage is pretty much what we would consider against like Geneva Convention rules or something now.
1820. That didn't.
Yeah, 1820. Yeah. But yeah, so Nacho comes back and turns himself in with the idea that I've spoken to the governor. I told him he's going to send his judge down to find us innocent, to give us a fair trial. And Don Alejandro is all for this. And Diego's like,
I don't trust them.
Idiots. but strangely though, they do patch up Don Alejandro, because there's a very jarring cut where it's like, Don Alejandro is almost dead. He's got a bullet wound in him. And then the next thing he's like happy and laughing in a jail cell. And he's like, oh no, the doctor fixed me up. I'm good as new now. It's like, I'm sure that was a bit longer of a
Episode.
of a thing in the show, but it is very jarring from like the, oh no, is my father gonna die? Nope, he's fine. He's okay.
Again, compilation of various episodes. There's probably an episode or two that explains why he's not there, or he's not near death.
Yeah, but we do get kind of the resolution of the second act, which is the trial of Don Alejandro and Don Nacho, and the Commandante has, as Diego worried he would, rigged this thing.
Yep, he sends Garcia to kind of delay the judge. And Pena is made, well, since he is a lawyer, is made the judge to make a quick sham trial to find both men guilty and both men to be hanged. And by the time the judge gets there, justice was served. Sorry.
Yep, sorry, their bodies are over there. I guess you can judge their dead bodies. Yeah. But once again, Zorro uses that, I'm going to stick the knife in your back and then swap it out for something else. And he basically tells Pena that if he doesn't do true justice, that he'll be run through with a sword.
Which, in any court of law, that's pretty shady in itself. That ruling may not stand.
But he was already doing a shady ruling. Once the judge gets there, he's going to be like, well, that guy shouldn't have been a judge in the first place. I mean, I can kind of see how in this one instance it worked, but yeah, I wouldn't count on this getting you out of any traffic tickets.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, thus resolves Act 2. Act 3 is kind of my favorite.
The fake Zorro storyline?
The fake Zorro storyline. There is a excellent swordsman who comes into town, a stranger to town, and immediately kills a guy in a duel.
And it's implied that this swordsman has some sort of relationship with the dancer that's in the restaurant here.
Yeah, it's never quite clear, but yeah, you have a feeling they know each other. And he fights another dude who was hitting on the dancer, basically.
All he wanted was a drink with her. He just says, come to my table for one drink.
Yeah, he's not a lecherous guy. He's not a creeper, and she seems fine going with him. And then this unknown swordsman comes in and totally murders the guy in the middle of the tavern.
Looking at my girl, you gotta go. It's like, it's just a drink. He was just thanking me for the dance I did. It's just, it's business. It's not personal.
Yeah. So, yeah.
If it had gotten to a point where the dude was a creeper, then the murder might have been justified because, it is 1820.
Yeah.
But he didn't do anything. He just, I would like to buy you a drink for the dance you did.
Yeah, and this guy is, as the Commandante says later, he's a little too quick to act.
Yeah.
He's a little too brash. He gets arrested because, of course, he did just kind of murder a dude in the middle of the tavern with everybody watching. And the Commandante gives him some sort of ultimatum, basically.
Yeah.
We can hang you because you did just commit murder, or I can pardon you if you dress up as Zorro and do like a bunch of crimes and stuff to make the people hate Zorro.
Yes, this is clearly sometime many, many, many days, weeks afterward. Again, we don't know how many episodes happened between this point.
Yeah. But
again, according to this movie, it was just like the next day.
Yeah, this movie, it's like an hour later. Yeah, yeah, so the Commandante is like, you're a good swordsman, you're about the same height and weight and everything. People will believe you're Zorro if you put on the costume. And this idea of somebody else vaguely Guy Williams shaped putting on the costume is the rest of this movie.
Yeah, this is the second half. The first storyline, that was half the movie, and this is the second half of the movie with the fake Zorro.
So, so fake Zorro is, his first task is to rob a dinner party that the Commandante is going to throw for all the important dons in the area.
Yep.
He's going to get all the rich people in town together in the tavern, and then fake Zorro is going to come in and rob them of all their valuables so that everybody will know fake Zorro is evil.
And it's never explained why Alejandro is not there. He said just illness, and then there's probably an episode that explains this, but we never see it in this movie. So Diego is there in his father's place.
Yeah.
The coincidence of the real hero there when the fake hero shows up.
Yeah, it's such a thin. Honestly, I'm not even sure there's an episode that explains it. This is one of those like 50s TV show things of like, the plot demanded he not be here, so he's sick. Yeah, that sounds fine. He's got a cold. Okay, moving on.
Again, it's a tired trope today, but considering this era, it probably was kind of a cool thing at the time to have the fake version of the hero.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this stuff when we're going kind of farther back in Disney history, it is one of those things where like by now this seems a tired old trope, but at the time it was probably not as overused as we would consider it. Some of them by the time they're used, they were already old hat. But some of this stuff, we've got to remember that at the time it probably wouldn't have been as it wouldn't have been a trope yet. Some of these things are literally the beginning of the trope.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but yeah, so fake Zorro comes in and robs everybody and insults people and is generally just a horrible cad. And Diego kind of just slips to the back of the crowd and out the door.
With no one seeing him.
Yeah. Which is kind of impressive because there's really only like 10 people in the room.
Mm.
So, and he is like a, 6'4" giant of a man. So, I don't really know how Diego slipped out, but there we go.
And it quickly changes into the Zorro costume.
Yeah, Bernardo is outside, just kind of hanging around. They don't really explain why in the film.
He is the servant, so he's just probably there with the carriage, hey, keep the car running kind of deal.
Yeah, maybe. But he is there to see Garcia helping fake Zorro in and out of places. And Garcia even mistakes real Zorro for fake Zorro and tips Diego off to the fact that the Commandante set this up. Because yes. Garcia comes up to like hold the ladder for, why aren't you in there yet? We had already planned for you to be in there robbing the Commandante,
Yeah, this version of Garcia is not very smart.
Yeah, and you honestly get the fact of this version of Garcia is that with any other boss, he would probably be a decent person.
Yeah.
That he's actually really deep down a good person. He doesn't want to be corrupt. He doesn't want to be... He just... That's what the boss says, and you do what the boss says.
Be a good soldier and follow orders.
Yeah. Now, granted, that does not give him immunity from the bad deeds he does throughout the course of the series, but you have a feeling that in a slightly different circumstance, he'd just be like lovable soldier Garcia, so yeah. But, real Zorro gets in there, fights fake Zorro, unmasks him, shows him to be the guy that had been arrested the night before or whenever. And basically, while he does not expose the Commandante, he does expose that this is just some dude dressed up as Zorro and not the legitimate Zorro.
Clearing his own name.
Yeah, clearing Zorro's name at least.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then of course pulling the fop-ish, wimp by saying he was protecting the liquor. That's why he disappeared.
Yeah, and actually that's like a really good thing because I do not know how he snuck across the room to get behind a table.
Yeah.
So that was definitely some camera trickery there, Diego. But eventually they turn around, discover Diego has been missing, and he pops up from behind a table holding a couple of bottles of liquor and was like, "Well, I didn't want him to get all the valuables." Ha 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 ha. End of episode.
Save the beer.
Yeah. But the fake Zorro storyline does not end there. This was apparently a multi-episode storyline.
So we go into Act 4.
Not yet. We're still in Act 3 here of this 4-act structure, but fake Zorro has one more trick to pull. The Commandante lets it be known that they executed the criminal. He is dead. They have buried him. In reality, they buried an empty box. There really is no dead body. And he takes fake Zorro up into the hillside. He gives him a black horse to look like Diego's horse Tornado, which we haven't really talked about. Tornado is amazing. Mm-hmm. Talk about animal sidekicks. Tornado the horse is one of my favorites from my childhood. Beautiful, jet black horse. Very, very fast, very, very smart, helps out Zorro all the time. Love Tornado. Yes, big fan.
They quickly explain him that he was just one of Diego's horses that he sent away to get trained, and Alejandro forgot about it.
Yeah.
That was their quick explanation. There's probably a longer explanation in the original stories, but as far as this TV show is concerned, he was my pet horse when I was a kid. I sent him to get trained. And my dad doesn't even know I had him.
Yeah, it's very kind of weird, but so Diego has a secret horse that only him and Bernardo know about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so the Commandante gives him a black horse that looks very much like Tornado, and he says, "You're going to go to a church, and you're going to steal this tiny little crown that sits on a statue of the Virgin Mary and has jewels in it."
And this is the part with fake Zorro. He actually shows a bit of valor in a way. Like he'll kill people, but he doesn't want to rob from a church. So there's some things even he won't do.
Yeah, and he immediately says, no, that's a line that even I won't cross. And the Commandante is very clear. Do you really want to be in the box we just buried? Because I can make that happen. So, on threat of death, he goes and robs the church and possibly kills a dude.
Yeah, there's I assume Native American guy working at the church. At least
some sort of native. Yeah. You do see natives throughout this. They are always servants in the background. At least during this film, but they were frequently. That is the role they had in the series overall.
So yeah, he's kind of the night guard of the church, if you want to call him that. Sees the robbery happen, and fake Zorro just runs him through because he's calling for the clergyman. Hey, your church is getting robbed.
Yeah, Father Pedro, I think.
Yeah, Father Pedro.
So he's calling for the priest. Hey, we're being robbed. Come out here, and the priest doesn't get there in time. This is one of the most unintentional funny bits of the whole movie, because the priest just hears no, help, oh, I'm dying, from the main church. And he's just sitting there, I guess reading the Bible or whatever with his little glasses on and everything. And he kind of looks up there is a man yelling for help in my church. Should I go help him? Help, he's killing me. Yes, I suppose I should go help. It's It's just this like far too long scene of a priest trying to decide whether he should get his butt out of the chair and go check on like the sword sounds and the obviously dying dude in the other room.
And
I laughed so hard at this scene.
I want to say that's probably an editing thing, but there's probably a longer scene. But considering the time this show was being aired, it probably just was that was just the thing and was to be taken seriously.
Yeah, it is one of the longest scenes because like all the scenes are just like they're cut down so short that like the second a character gets done talking, they're just off to another scene because they don't have time. But the fact that it kind of lingers on this priest not saying a word, just kind of pondering whether or not he should get out of his chair and check on this, is just the funniest thing in the world to me. Unintentional highlight of the film.
Yeah. So, we get to Bernardo, who tells Diego that the church was robbed, and Diego's plan is to take some, they specifically say that these are fake jewels that he found in Spain.
That he got made.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing is I'm wondering, like, it's never explained in the context of this film, like, why is Diego having fake gems made? I don't know what this plan was. I don't know why, when he was in Spain, before he ever decided to become Zorro, like, what was he doing at university that necessitated him to create an entire bag of fake gems? He specifically says that he got somebody to make them. So he went to an artisan, like a glassmaker or something, and was like, I need some reasonable forgeries of precious jewels.
Maybe there was some gambling going on at university, and he kind of wanted to get in on that, but didn't want to spend his own money.
Was Zorro involved in a LARP or something? Like, what was this a prop
I don't know.
for?
It's never explained in the context of this movie, but he has these fake gems, and
yeah,
that's his plan is to.
He has them for reasons, okay?
Yeah, because the plot says so.
Yeah, the plot says he has fake gems, so he has fake gems. But here's where you actually do see the wit and the intelligence of Zorro. Because his idea is, and with the help of Bernardo, his idea is that he's going to, like, go into a public place, the tavern, where the entire town hangs out at night, and drop some of these gems.
Specifically to the same dancer we saw earlier on.
Yeah, I think that ended up being kind of, because one of them goes to the dancer, and then there's a second one Bernardo puts as, like, a tip on a tray of a waitress. But basically, he's going to spread around these gems because the idea is that whoever would have been holding the gems and would be the guilty party would suddenly start checking their own purse to see if the gems had fallen out or whatever. Mm-hmm. Shockingly, this somehow works. Yeah. It's not the greatest plan. I'm going to say, like, I give them props for trying to show the cunning and the wit of Zorro, but as far as a plan, this ain't it, Chief, you know? Like,
somehow toss a gem to your witcher actually works.
Yeah, apparently. It ends up being that the shady lawyer is the one who gives away the con here. He is not the one that's meant to be holding the gems, and we know that because the gems on the crown, remember I said it was a tiny, tiny crown that was on top of the statue of Maria in the thing? Okay. Yeah, the gems in that are very tiny. They're like, you know, ones that you would put in an earring or something. They're very little. The fake gems that Diego have are like honking like 4-carat large gems. Mm-hmm. Okay. So had the lawyer seen this crown that was stolen, he would have known that they were tiny, tiny gems and these were not the same gems. But all the lawyer knows is he stole a jeweled crown, now he's got jewels. He assumes that fake Zorro is somewhere in the crowd being overly generous with his newfound wealth and is tipping dancers and waitresses in rubies and diamonds, and runs off to tell the Commandante.
Yeah, I'm guessing old shady lawyer doesn't go to church. Otherwise, he would have seen the crown.
Yeah, this is like, you know, this crown would fit on your pet rat. You know, it's very small. But anyway, him fleeing the scene and allowing Zorro to follow him is what kind of points to the fact that, yes, the Commandante is behind all of this, and it is, in fact, the same fake Zorro from before.
Yeah, Diego's follows the Commandante because the Commandante is going to kill fake Zorro because they're convinced that he's double-crossed them.
Here's the thing, though. Diego is still dressed as Diego. He has not had time to put on his Zorro costume. And fake Zorro is gonna get murdered if he doesn't act now. Oh no, what to do?
So and fake Zorro actually figures out that he's gonna get double crossed because he sets up a dummy to get pretty much a bag of hay that gets stabbed, and he's gonna kill the Commandant. And Diego doesn't want that to happen either because he wants the Commandant to face justice.
Yeah, Zorro very much not for killing at all. You know, he wants everybody to live and see, the inside of a jail cell.
Yeah. So this is like, if you've seen anything involving where the hero has to not only fight but stay in their secret identity character, Diego has to sword fight fake Zorro while still showing off that he's the inept swordsman that everyone thinks he is. It's Bruce Wayne trying to fight, but still trying people think he's a weakling. It's Prince Adam trying to fight Skeletor, but trying everyone thinking that he's still a wimp.
Yeah, and like I said, this becomes such an overused trope in superhero things that now we're like, oh, it's that one again. But I don't know how often it had been used by the time this series did it.
Yeah.
But I will give it to whoever choreographed this fight. This sword fight is awesome. It is very difficult to, as difficult as it is to choreograph a good sword fight. Trying to choreograph a good sword fight in which one participant is pretending to not know what they're doing. If you've ever seen like the Jackie Chan Drunken Master movies, it's a very similar idea of like, oh, I just lucked into dodging your thing there. Oh, I just made you accidentally run into a table. Oh, it's very much in that style, and it works so well.
And kudos to Guy Williams on the acting, on the physical acting in that one.
Yeah, because he, normally when he does a sword fight, he does have a proper fencer stance, and, he looks like he knows what he's doing. And throughout this entire fight, he's got, like, the wrong foot position, his arms are kind of, noodly and floppy.
There's no finesse. He's just flipping the sword wildly.
Yeah, but at the same time, he has just enough finesse that the viewer can go, well, obviously Diego knew just when to sidestep that, or just how to flick his sword right that he accidentally parried that, This is a brilliantly done sword fight. If you're really into film sword fights, especially of this kind of cool rapier style, this is a good one.
Especially for 1950s television.
Yeah, I mean, this was a television show, too. It wasn't even like a major theatrical production. But bravo to everybody involved in the choreographing and filming of this thing, because it is gorgeous. But, Zorro holds his own, and he actually accidentally, in giant air quotes, flicks the sword out of his opponent's hand. And so now we've got an unarmed fake Zorro.
That gets shot by the Commandante.
Yeah, immediately. Commandante doesn't even, he's like, oh, look, an unarmed opponent. Bang.
And it's pretty much to cover his own butt here. Because if they had properly arrested fake Zorro, he would have talked.
Oh, yeah, the fake Zorro had no loyalty to the Commandant at any point during this. He was roped into this. He did not want to be doing this scheme. This was not... He finally agrees to rob the church. We kind of skipped over it, but he finally agrees to rob the church, not only on pain of death, but with the reward that he will be sent, basically all expenses paid, to Spain under a new name with all of his crimes wiped free to start a new life in Spain.
Yep.
You know, he'll get money and passage on a ship, and he'll just, you know, settle down in Spain under whatever name he wants and create whatever life he wants for himself. Which is, you know, a good deal if you're a guy. They kind of suggest, again, it might be more spelled out in the series, but I haven't seen the series since I was a little kid, so I don't really remember most of the particulars. But it is kind of suggested in this film that he has a pretty long rap sheet. Yeah, you know, by the time he came to Los Angeles, he was probably a wanted man quite all over the territory.
Yep. Probably several territories, you don't know.
Yeah, we really don't know a lot about him. But, you know, fake Zorro is dead, and Diego is not super happy.
Yeah, he pretty much gets in his face. Why did you shoot him? Well, you know, he's a criminal, and he was running, so I shot him.
And then the Commandante starts Act 4 with a very interesting question.
How was the worst swordsman in Los Angeles able to take down this criminal?
Who is one of the best swordsmen in Los Angeles.
Yes.
We see him fighting Zorro earlier, and he is almost a match for Zorro. The real one. Mm-hmm. So how is Diego, who everybody knows is the worst at everything, still alive?
And Diego plays it off as luck. You know, I just got lucky. You know, but the Commandante, he plays it up. You are Zorro. I know you're Zorro. I'm going to prove you're Zorro, and you're going to go to jail.
And he immediately arrests Diego.
Yeah, I mean, the Act 4 starts with them bringing Diego into Commandante's office, pretty much saying, you're under arrest, you're Zorro.
And the second he says, you're Zorro, Garcia loses his mind. He has the greatest laugh. Just laughing. So, like, if
Bruce Wayne is Batman?
Yeah.
Really? Bruce Wayne is Batman? Clark Kent Superman? No way. Yeah. Peter Parker Spider-Man? This scrawny kid is Spider-Man? No way.
Yeah, it's that whole thing again, you know, like, sorry, Commandante, but Diego is the worst at everything. He cannot possibly be Zorro. Are you feeling okay? You know, you are delusional. Please, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But he cannot prosecute Diego because they hear a big announcement.
The Viceroy is coming.
The Viceroy's coming.
All the way from Spain.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So he's big. This big deal is coming. So, so he's got to kiss up to the Viceroy. Because the Commandante knows that he has a reputation, and he wants to erase that reputation. You know, make sure that we have no criminals. Make sure that the jails are empty because we have no crime in Los Angeles. Heh, no crime in Los Angeles, ha!
Even at that time. But, yeah, he also says to make the tavern give everybody free wine so that everybody's drunk and happy. He wants the populace to be happy, even if you have to shoot them.
Yep.
Bravo to Garcia for just being like, even I don't understand how that's supposed to work, sir. You know?
If they're drunk, they'll do whatever you want them to do.
I think he meant, I meant the shooting, because when he says, do it even if you have to shoot them, Garcia's like, yes, sir, and then he has this look on his face like, wait, that, even to me, that doesn't make sense. I don't even know how that would work.
I guess if you shoot one, then everyone else will at least pretend to be happy.
Yeah,
or they'll get shot themselves.
So the Viceroy arrives and everybody in town is drunk and happy and cheering and we love the Commandante and look, our jail cells are not only empty but we have decorated them with flowers. Yeah, that was a weird thing to me. Like when we see the jail cells, there are like trellises of flowers over the open jail cell doors that I do not remember being there before.
I assume it's to be that our jail cells have been empty so long, the plants have overtaken them.
Yeah, nature has retaken the jail cells. Yeah, but still, it's a funny image.
And then the Viceroy
is not alone, though. We have to mention, when the Viceroy arrives, he is not alone. He has brought his beautiful young daughter.
With
not
the Commandante,
young, but like young woman.
Yes, young woman. And
like,
the Commandante is instantly smitten with her.
Yeah.
Completely.
The Commandante immediately wants to marry this chick.
No offense to the actress, but no, she ain't that beautiful.
She's fine.
She's attractive and likely, dead right now. But,
yeah, I mean, she'd be in her 80s easily, but,
but for this film, she's at an age that she's marginally attractive. Not, I would marry this woman the minute I saw her hot, but, attractive.
No, remember, she is rich, and the Viceroy's daughter. That's really his reasoning. When he tells Garcia later, he says, a marriage between me and the daughter of the Viceroy would be very good for me, wouldn't it? He doesn't care about her as a woman. He cares about her as the daughter of the Viceroy and a political...
It's a funny scene with Garcia. Is like, aren't I a handsome man? I'm not attracted to you that way, sir. No,
if you were a woman... Yeah.
If I was a woman and I looked the way I do, I wouldn't be picky about any man I marry.
Yeah. Fat jokes.
Yeah.
Still not funny even in the 50s. Anyway.
But the what I was trying to say is that it's revealed that the Viceroy knows Diego. Like, it's not
yeah, that is kind of a later point. Of that is that yes, the Viceroy and his daughter are both good friends with Diego because the Viceroy's unseen son was with him at university.
Yep.
But when they first arrive, going back to when they first get out of the carriage, the Commandante goes around and, let me show you that our jails are empty. Let me show you how happy the people are. Let me kiss your butt. And the second the Viceroy is alone with his daughter, the Viceroy asks his daughter, what do you make of the man? And she's like, he's a complete idiot.
And for 1820s terminology, even by 1950s terminology, the fact that he has so much faith in his daughter's judgment.
Yeah, I mean, good for him.
So, what do you think of this guy? He's an idiot. Okay, he's an idiot.
The thing is I love this character of the daughter. She is awesome because from the second she steps off that carriage, she is just throwing out these little razor one-liners to insult the Commandante.
The shade.
Yeah, it is great. He says something about, if only we'd have known you were coming sooner, we could have had, a dais with flowers. And she's like, oh, it seems that the flowers you didn't put out for our arrival are tripping off your tongue. It's like, it's so good. I love her.
For not only 1820s, but for 1950s to have a woman say these things to a man, no matter what her position in life is. And
yeah, she is just insulting him constantly and just gets away with it. It's so good. But yeah, he decides he wants to have a big party at the tavern because everything happens in the tavern. We built that set. We're going to use it.
Yep.
So he decides that he's going to have a big dinner party again for the Viceroy and the Viceroy's daughter. And at the end of the dinner, he says, "I have caught the outlaw Zorro." And he brings in the outlaw Zorro and unmasks him in front of everybody. At which point, the Viceroy and his daughter are like, "Diego, we haven't seen you in ages. How have you been?" The Commandante has not known until this point that there was any personal knowledge between the De La Vegas and the Viceroy's family.
Yep.
This does bring up an interesting point, though, because a little bit later, skipping ahead, we are going to get another fight where Diego has to pretend to be the world's worst sword fighter. It is established at this point how they know him is because the Viceroy's son and Diego were good college buddies, and he was like always over at their house, and they really know each other. How do they not know that Diego de la Vega is the best swordsman on campus? That he won all the tournaments in everything. Seriously,
maybe,
though,
yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, if it makes it sound like him and the son were best friends. If my best friend, like, won an award for something, I would definitely come home and tell my family, like, "Hey, I'm so proud of my best friend. They just won this major award." They just, I do that now. Something good happens to one of my friends, I'll tell my father, like, "I'm really happy, a friend of mine just got a new job, or, just had a baby, or just whatever good thing just happened in their life, I'm going to be telling my parents about it." So, how do they not know that he is, like, the best fighter? That was my only question about this, the way this plays out, the resolution of this, is that if they know Diego that well, how have they not heard that he won every award while at university?
There is an unseen conversation. I don't know if it was in the original show or not, because Diego and the Viceroy want a minute to talk to each other, so the Commandante leaves the tavern. We don't know what they discussed.
Yeah, in the context of the movie, I don't know. I also think that in the show, just because of the way it plays out, it really only works for the audience if you see it from the Commandante's point of view. So I'm willing to believe that there is nothing of this that was shown in the original series either.
Because we don't know what the conversation they had. Maybe he says, "Hey, I'm going to pretend not to fight because I want to make point to the Commandante."
Yeah.
Or something. We don't know. And we probably never know what the conversation is. So, as the Commandante is outside having the conversation with Garcia that we talked about, they quickly change some clothes around. One of the other soldiers is told by the Viceroy to put on the Zorro costume as a test to the Commandante. Commandante comes back in. This man is Zorro. This man, Don Diego, is Zorro.
Yeah, look at this man. I am 100% positive that this man standing in front of me in this costume and mask is Zorro. And they're like, "But what if you had somebody that was a similar height or had a similar mustache?" And he's like, "No, absolutely not. I would know Zorro at all." At which point, Diego pops up from behind the bar and is like, "Well, there's your positive identification."
And
wah, wah, wah.
Yep. Got played right there.
Yep, at which point the Commandante pulls the mask off and realizes it's one of his own Lancers who has been told by the Viceroy to put on the costume just to test the Commandante. And the Viceroy admits that he doesn't need Diego's testimony. He was already going to come down here and he already knew enough to arrest the Commandant anyway.
Yeah, at least remove him from the position.
Yeah, remove him from the position. But the Commandant is absolutely still stuck on this Zorro thing. He is going to get a win today. So he challenges Diego to a duel, pulls out the glove and slaps him and everything.
And at that point, Diego cannot say no. I mean, it's like it's an honor thing.
Yeah, I mean, his family would be disgraced, and it would be bad for everybody.
Even if he's playing a character, he still has to defend the De La Vega honor.
Yeah.
And Spanish machismo and all.
Yeah. And so once again, we get another really good fight scene. Not quite as good as the one on the mountaintop with fake Zorro, but this is also a really good fight scene of Diego, accidentally dodging things and accidentally parrying things and, breaking things and stuff like that in the tavern between him and the Commandante. Mm-hmm. And as the Commandante has a sword to Diego's throat and says, "You have to admit you're Zorro or I'll slit your throat and that'll be the end of you," you hear a horse from outside, and here comes Tornado, and a knife is thrown into the door of the tavern, and they all turn and look, and there is Zorro on Tornado riding off into the sunset. And the note says, "Sorry I couldn't attend your party, Zorro," or something like that.
Yeah, sorry I missed your party. Love Zorro.
Yeah. And so Diego is cleared. We obviously just saw Zorro.
And it's Bernardo wearing the Zorro costume.
Yeah, Bernardo turns a corner and takes off the mask and has a good laugh, and him and Tornado go home to share some carrots or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Good horse.
Yep, good horsey. I love me some Tornado. That horse was always I was like, man, I want a horse like that. And at this point, the Commandante has obviously proven himself to be completely unhinged and, all other manner of bad moods.
Unfit for office.
Unfit for office. So he is removed from office, and Garcia, you get a promotion. And what is Garcia's first thing he does with his promotion?
Let's all get drunk!
Yeah, let's declare a holiday in celebration of my promotion. Ha 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 ha. Freeze frame, end of movie.
Yeah, and this is obviously the end of an episode, and it's not really a movie ending because there's no climax, really. We've had several climaxes at this point.
Yeah, each act has its own little mini climactic moment, the little fight scene or whatever.
And in a way, this kind of works in the Disney vibe because a lot of their movies in this era were very episodic in themselves. Like each act would have an ending. Something that could work as an ending. Like you could take the first act of, for example, Pinocchio, and that could have been its own short.
Yeah.
That's just how Disney made their movies back then. So it works in that vibe, but as a movie on its own merit, the movie just ends. Like there's the end. Walt Disney Productions, we're done here. Go home. Movie over.
Yeah, movie's over. Why are you still here? Go home. So like everything else in this movie, the ending is abrupt. All the transitions are abrupt. All the exposition is abrupt, They absolutely chose the scenes that were like, oh, this is the plan? Let us go do the plan. We have now done the plan. The plan is over, It's like...
Yeah, this is just, we're going to take the main storyline of this first part of the series, give you only the essential parts. Like, only the essential parts, and that's it. That's the movie. And as
like I said, it really is the Cliff's Notes version of Zorro. There's no flavor to it, and it's really sad because the series itself did have a lot of that. There's a lot of cool character moments, and little comedy bits, and interesting backstory, and all of that gets removed.
Yeah, this did actually do well overseas, and I think that's only because they did not have the full series of Zorro yet overseas.
Yeah.
But in terms of America, not so much. Again, the show had been off the air for a few years, running in reruns. Seeing this version, it was enough that they did a second compilation movie. There was
the Avenger?
Yeah, Zorro the Avenger. There we go. Zorro the Avenger, the second compilation movie, which was only released overseas, never had an American release, and with good reason. Again, at that point, the show had been off the air, what, 6-7 years at that point?
Maybe. The it's fascinating to me because this was, we talk now about the Disney cash grab. Boy, was this a Disney cash grab.
Yeah.
It was not a Disney cash grab that went particularly well, mind you. But this was definitely Walt trying to get a few extra bucks.
Yeah, we need to get a movie out. We had this stuff already made. Again, like we said before, Davy Crockett work, let's try it now. And a lot of it was, stuff they'd already seen. It was a black and white movie released in 1960. So it wasn't it wasn't going to get that much traction anyway.
And remember that films went color a lot earlier than television did. So, color films were already, everything was in color by 1960. Yeah. So,
I mean, Snow White was released in color, and that was the first one.
Yeah. But, even every short film, it's, they were pretty much all, color film was the standard by 1960.
By the 40s, color was the standard.
Yeah. So this was very old-fashioned. Why would I go pay my, dime or quarter or whatever a movie cost in those days that we would consider absurd now?
Remember when it cost a quarter? Now they're almost $20.
Yeah. But why would you go pay your change, your pocket change, to go see something you could see on TV for free? Instead of just, buying a comic book or some candy or, whatever else that would buy you.
Or, go see a different movie of something.
Or go see a different movie, that you've never seen before. So I get why this was not a hit, with the thing. And honestly, even if you've never seen Zorro and you just want to know what Zorro is like, go on Disney Plus and watch this. It's an hour and a half of your time. It's not that much. What else you doing these days? Fine.
As an introduction to Zorro, I would say this is good. As a standalone film, it is not.
Yeah. If you want the Cliff's Notes of what is the motivation and origin story of Zorro, this is it. I really kind of... have they put the full series on? I do not think they've put the full series on Disney Plus.
No, they have not. This is it.
Yeah,
and I don't know the reasons, and it could just be a rights issue. We don't know who else owns the rights, because there was a couple of the colorized episodes that you can find on YouTube. Most of them have been copyright claimed by Sony, so Sony might have some sort of influence on that.
Yeah, I really hope that they'll put the full series up there, that whatever might be keeping them from doing that will get cleared up, because the series was actually very good. I have very fond memories of this series as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
This was a thing I loved watching.
And especially me as a kid, growing up as a Latino kid, I didn't see many Latino superheroes. So Zorro was one of the few Latino superheroes that I saw on television as a kid.
Yeah, and it's great for representation. I hope, whether or not they do it as a woman, I would love to see a daughter of Zorro personally. I think that would be cool. I'm always for more women in leading roles, of course.
Yeah.
I would like to see, just like you said, I want to see myself depicted too. That's great.
Yeah.
And women of color by far get even fewer heroes than men of color do. So, yes, I definitely would love to see that. But in any form, I would love to see New Zorro. We talked about Mask of Zorro with Antonio Banderas, and honestly, I like that movie. It's not great, but it's a good popcorn flick.
Yeah, again, it reignited the Zorro fandom, and there was a few cartoons, but they didn't really last long.
Yeah, and it reignited it in comic book form, too. Right about that time, there was a big revival of Zorro stories in comic book form. I love this character, and I love, historically, this character. I want to see some of the old superheroes come back. You know, we got a Phantom movie in the 90s.
Got a Shadow movie in the 90s.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
Later on, we got a Shadow movie, and that wasn't that great either, you know? I would like to see, also though, characters like Zorro and, well, not as much Zorro, but especially the Phantom and the Shadow, they were meant to be serialized characters. Mm-hmm. You know, they were kind of built for kind of longer story arcs.
Long form story.
I would love to see like a TV series of that. You know?
Netflix, get on this.
Yeah, it would be great. I have no idea what company might own the rights to film these things these days, but I would love to see some of these older heroes brought back. I would love to see a new version of Scarlet Pimpernel. I think that would be amazing. But definitely Zorro. Zorro is a very kind of specific niche character. I think he's important to, you know, Hispanic and Latino people as being like kind of one of the bigger ones, you know, that ever broke through into the mainstream. But, you know, you could even update the character and make it a Mexican character now.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing necessarily that says the character has to be from Spain in the colonial period. You could absolutely update it. You know, make him Puerto Rican, make it, you know, any kind of Hispanic in the Americas these days.
That was part of the Banderas movie, was that he was Mexican. He was you know, Don Diego was played by Anthony Hopkins. And he passed the mantle on to a new Zorro. Yeah. You know. So
you could absolutely do a modern character that is a descendant of the De La Vega family. You know, whatever. They've been, you know, raised in the Americas, the greater Americas, or something. Or they were inspired. You know, it doesn't even have to be a relative. Just be somebody who took inspiration from the original Zorro. Mm-hmm. There's so much you can do with this character, just like most of these characters. I mean, it comes up in Batman a lot. You know, the mask is an ideal. And behind that ideal, it doesn't really matter who the person is.
It's kind of like what they did with Into the Spider-Verse, how anyone could be Spider-Man.
Yeah. I'd love to see, you know, just somebody new take up the mantle of Zorro, you know, put a black mask and some kind of long coat or black cape or cool hat, you know?
Yeah, you can make it happen. And again, if this reboot does happen again, we haven't heard much about it since last year, and really nothing's happening right now in Hollywood as it is. So who knows when that starts again? Maybe not. We don't. And superhero TV shows, they're popular right now. I mean, the CW, half their lineup are superhero shows.
Oh, yeah. You know.
Thinking of Disney, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been a really popular show for them for so long.
Yeah, and we just found out yesterday when we got our first, as we're recording this, it was yesterday, but we just saw the first kind of teaser clips and got our official date for that. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could be done. And Disney is losing kind of their big superhero television property anyway.
I mean, we know they're making more for the Disney Plus, but there's not going to be anything on mainstream television.
Yeah, and right now they've got 4 different outlets easily that they need to create content for. They've got, you know, the main ABC channel and Disney Channel and stuff, you know, so they got like mainstream TV cable. They've got the films, of course, and now they've got 2 streaming services because they've got Disney Plus and Hulu. that they're having to come up with stuff for. So, cast that wide net, Disney. Give it a chance. Sign it up for 8 episodes, and if it does good, make 8 episodes more. You got the money.
Yeah, you got the money.
You have all of the money. You have all of the money in the world. You are a giant repository of the world's wealth. Do something good with it.
Yeah, I would love that there are characters and heroes that Disney owns that are not Marvel based that they could really work with. Thanks to the DuckTales reboot, we're getting more Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, which great. I love me some Darkwing Duck.
I just saw a clip of Steelbeak and the Rescue Rangers on DuckTales. I'm in.
Yeah, it's just totally. I'd love to see a Rescue Rangers reboot. Let's do some of these cool things. Because here's the thing. Zorro has been out of the popular consciousness since 1998.
Yep.
Really, that was the last big Zorro thing.
Yeah, the sequel didn't do so well.
Yeah, but still, Antonio Banderas in the 90s, that was really the last big Zorro thing we've got.
Yep.
He is due for a reboot. Ever since the character was created, he comes back every, 20 or 30 years in a new form. It's time. Let's get us some more Zorro.
So, for our own personal preferences, this movie, I don't think there's a lot of magic in there, but the series, there's definite magic there.
Yeah, if you can find, I don't know if somebody's uploaded anything to YouTube or wherever else, but if you can find some actual episodes of this series, I encourage you to go find them. If anybody connected to Disney is listening, put this up on Disney Plus, because I want to see this series again. It was a good series, a good memory from my childhood, and even seeing these kind of butchered clips thrown together just really reminded me of how much fun I had watching this series. So yeah, for the series, magic.
There's one thing we didn't talk about: the theme song.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun theme song. It's not
out of the night when the full moon is bright. When I heard that song again, like, oh, that's so much memories of watching that show as a kid. Like,
yeah, that is a nostalgia trip. There is something about TV theme songs from your childhood that will just send you for a loop.
And sadly, TV theme songs are kind of a lost medium, sort of.
Yeah, bring back TV theme songs, please. I'm desperate for TV theme songs again. I love TV theme songs. I used to have albums of compilations of TV theme songs. I want more of them. Make that a thing again.
With lyrics, so we can sing along.
Yeah, with lyrics, so we can sing along too. Because the last
great one was The Big Bang Theory, and that was Bare Naked Ladies. And
Bare Naked Ladies is an amazing band, so almost anything they write is going to be gold. But yeah. Actually, I will name drop the theme song to Young Sheldon, which has an actual theme song, because that is a favorite song of mine from an album that almost nobody knows. That is a song called Mighty Little Man, which was the first single off of the album Songs for Dust Mites by Steve Burns, the original host of Blue's Clues. That was his first album he released after leaving Blue's Clues. It is great. It is almost impossible to find, but I think all the songs from that album have been uploaded by fans to YouTube. I have everything he has ever released musically. Some of it I had to get through bootleg. He is a brilliant artist. I love him. Great musician. But yeah,
and you lost your mind.
To hear it. I lost my mind. Yeah.
You lost your mind when it was announced that he came back for the reboot of Blue's Clues.
I did too. Yeah. Anytime Steve Burns shows up in anything, I did. And as Tuesday has access to all of my social media and all that. Yeah, my social media, absolutely. I went nuts when they used that song for Sheldon. And then I also went nuts when Steve Burns shows up as a cameo in a recent episode for that too. So, and yeah, when they did the Blue's Clues reboot and they brought Steve back as Detective Steve, oh, so good. I cosplay Steve, and Detective Steve needs to be an upgrade to my former Blue's Clues cosplay. So. Okay, that was this week's Coulson rant.
That was, yep. Last week was Clark Gregg. This week is Steve Burns.
Eventually, you're gonna know all of my completely. At least the Clark Gregg thing was Disney related. I don't know how we got on this. So there you go. There's my weird brain for the week. Enjoy.
So that's all we can say about Disney Zorro. You want to move on to what we're doing next week?
Yeah, what do we got for next week?
Next week, we are once again leaving Disney Plus, because this series is not, because we are going to have a special guest on next week, and this special guest specifically requested a certain show from back in the day, the old Saturday morning days. We are going to be taking a look at a show called the Schnookums and Meat Funny Cartoon Show, which I'm pretty sure most of the people listening have no idea what that show is.
Yeah, it wasn't as big a hit as it probably deserved to be back in the day. It is something that's in the back of my mind, but I'm going to admit, I did not watch a lot of it when it originally came on. It's something I remember being on. I watched an episode or two. So this will be an interesting reintroduction to the series for me.
This is, it's to me, it's like that and Marsupilami. I knew those shows existed. I know they're Disney. I don't remember anything about them.
Yeah. So we're kind of excited to look into this, but this is kind of our first foray into, I guess we could call it lost media. Are we going to call it lost media? Yeah, I think we are. I think
it would, because again, there's no DVDs of this show. You cannot find it streaming anywhere. So I think it would until they put it on Disney Plus, I would consider it lost media.
Yeah. However, we're gonna go poke around YouTube, because we've heard that it might be there. So join us next week when we will have a super secret special guest, and we will be talking about Schnookums and Meat.
All right, guys. So tune in for that, and we will see you guys then. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Rewatching the Magic. We invite you to keep the magic going by joining the conversation online. Find us on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic, on Twitter at Rewatch the Magic, and of course, find all new episodes at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com. Until next time, remember, the magic is for everyone. It only stops if you let it.